John, could you tell us where we are right now?
We are sitting in the garden of my house called Gorwell House, which is pronounced around here Gorrel House, and it means muddy well. And we experienced some mud, all right. And here we are. We've just done a tour of the garden, which I planted over many years, and we're sort of sipping some wedding prosecco.
Thank you. They're in Barnstaple. And this is the Devon Unplugged course. How did the idea of a summer dogma teacher training course come?
Mark? Yeah, well, this is my fourth summer here in Barnstaple teaching courses for Sol. And the courses have developed further every year. So when I first came, I just fitted into an existing course and really didn't have any influence over it. And then with the next course, I built in some other places and interviews, actually getting people out of the classroom and meeting people and doing little projects, because before that it had just been the methodology in the classroom and visits and excursions. And I thought that this was missing a great opportunity. And then I think in the third year there were some people who stayed on extra and who got Comenius grants, and with them I started saying, well, look, why don't you decide, like where we're going to go to and what we're going to do, and then when we got the feedback on that, it was very, very good that they actually enjoyed having a bit more responsibility. I then met Luke in Istanbul. It was last year in April, and we got on very well, and we chatted on the bus and places, and then after last summer, Grenville, who's the executive director of Sol, said it would be quite good to have a third course. And what did I think it could be on? And I immediately thought, this was last August, a year ago now, I thought, why don't we do a Devon Unplugged course? And actually what I've been doing for 2 or 3 days with just a small group of teachers, why don't we try to do that with the whole group for the whole course? So I suggested it to Grenville, and then he said, well, who do you think you could work with? And immediately I thought, well, Luke would be the ideal person to do this, because the fact that we got on, I mean, when you train, it's important that you get on with people on a personal level. And we'd only known each other a little bit through blogs and Twitter, but I was quite confident that we'd be able to form a team and bring together my teacher training experience over 20 years of doing summer courses, and Luke's experience of dogma and teaching unplugged. So we asked Luke, and he said, yeah. So that was it.
I believe you're between two massive powers. The machinery of huge publishing companies and the movement of customization, user-created content, and unique individual needs, and all kinds of guerrilla movements like guerrilla marketing, guerrilla gardening. So how do you feel between these two big streams?
Well, I suppose I feel that we're much closer to the second kind of experience and movement that you talked about. I think what's interesting, when Dogma started in 2000, I immediately felt that it had a kind of, it was a sort of an example of convergent thinking, because people were relating it to ideas in different fields, one of which is open space technology, which is now familiar from the unconferencing movement. So that was already current in 2000. I could see links to the idea of organic food, fair trade, and that sort of thing. The whole idea of privileging local production and a kind of natural way of dealing with things and a natural way of creating resources compared to a mechanized way. But I think what's so interesting is that sort of convergence was apparent at the time. But the idea of technology felt as if it wasn't one of those movements. It still felt, even though we had email, and even though the Dogma movement started as an email group, using what was actually cutting-edge technology at the time, even though it looks a bit clunky now. The Yahoo group for Dogma ELT was, it was unusual at the time. But when we talked about technology in classrooms, we were still thinking in terms of large cassette recorders or video players, very much in terms of mainly stuff that was produced by publishers and played in class, or stuff that was recorded with some difficulty at home by videoing the news and then bringing it in. But there was no way to edit something you wanted recorded off the TV before bringing it to school, and so it could become it was a sort of fairly cumbersome procedure, and it could also lead to some very lengthy input sessions in class, even if one was going to the trouble of recording one's own stuff. So what was amazing, I think, during the 2000s was, first of all, from my personal point of view, feeling, okay, we've got this exciting idea about teaching, and it's about to be blown right out of the water by this whole wave of new technologies. And suddenly wondering, literally, when we were starting to write Teaching Unplugged, which is when the kind of tipping point was starting to loom on the horizon, to do with mobile technology and broadband and access and all those things, wondering whether actually the moment had passed. But what was great, and a considerable relief, given that we were already writing the book, was that it started to become apparent that mobile technology and Web 2 were completely resonated really strongly with dogma, because the principle of it is the same one. It's to do with doing things in a bottom-up way. It's about doing things for oneself. It's about creating content from one's immediate environment and then sharing it as a community. And there have been people recently, I can think of presentations by Nick Robinson and Hakan Senturk in particular, and there have been others, people explicitly making the connections between unplugged teaching and the use of technology. And you've done the same. We were together in Košice, and there was just no kind of contradiction between your talk, which focused mainly on using technology, if I remember correctly, but actually could also have been about dogma, because the whole discourse of education you were using was bottom-up, non-linear, do-it-yourself.